Hello, Tristan.
Hey, Emil, how you doing?
I'm very good. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. Pretty good.
Good. So one more episode of Sunday session. I think this is like number 7 or number 8. I think, but we probably have some newcomers watching. So I'll make a quick introduction. My name is Emil. I live in the northern parts of Sweden in a small town called Umeå. But I'm traveling every second week to Stockholm. So I'm the bar manager for the Grand Hotel in Stockholm, which is not as busy as it used to be, but we still have some people coming around. I'm also a global bar ambassador for Mackmyra, and starting with that job in the 1st of March, which wasn't the best of timings, but looking forward to working a lot with Mackmyra and try to make like a cocktail program and start working with bars all around the world with Mackmyra and spread the word about Swedish whiskey and Swedish single malt. And together with me on the Sundays, I have Tristan Stephenson, famous author of the Curious books and legend in the business, and also the owner of Black Rock in London, but now from Cornwall, right?
Yeah, I'm originally from Cornwall actually, but moved to London when I started opening bars. And I only lived there for about 5 years and then decided to move back when I had a family. But I'm still up there regularly, apart from right now, where I'm not going anywhere. Apart from into your living room.
Yes, as always, like every Sunday. So it was World Whiskey Day yesterday. What did you do?
Yeah, actually, I did a tasting, much like this, but with my own whiskey subscription company. I guess I'll get a plug in here. Why not? Hey,
let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. One of my businesses is a whiskey subscription club where we send our members 50 ml drams of whiskey every single month. Costs £7 a month. But what you tend to be getting is kind of bottles of whiskey that would typically, typically cost 50 to 90 pounds a bottle. So you're not talking about kind of entry level stuff. It's the kind of price of a bottle of whiskey where most of us might go, well, I don't know if I want to spend that much money on a bottle of whiskey without trying it first. So Whiskey Me sort of serves as an opportunity to try stuff first. And we send it through the letterbox in these kind of pouches. The main reason
I've seen those.
Yeah, the main reason being that they do actually fit through a letterbox, unlike little glass miniatures, and they don't break either. So it means we can post them relatively cheap, which means our prices are relatively cheap. So yeah, we did a tasting yesterday for World Whiskey Day of three whiskeys, and I was actually hosting it, and I spoke to 3 different whiskey makers from around the world, from 3 different from 3 different continents actually, and we had a nice tasting. It was very much in the same style as what we do on the Sunday sessions here, so it was great.
Okay, cool. Which were the whiskeys? We don't mind here at Mackmyra because we do a Swedish single malt. We don't have any competition doing Swedish single malt, so it doesn't matter.
No. We didn't taste any other Swedish single malt, so we did Irish whiskey, JJ Corey.
Cool.
Yeah. And we did Whistle Pig, which is, I'm sure you know, it's an American rye whiskey from Vermont. Mm-hmm. And then we did an Australian whiskey, Starwood Nova, which is an Aussie whiskey aged in Aussie red wine casks. So 3 completely different whiskies. Different approach to making whiskey and different flavors that come out the other end as well.
Yeah, I got it. A little bit like how we do then. A different approach, but we stay true to the tradition of making whiskey, but everybody is doing their own things in their own environment, what suits them the best, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've talked about this before on the Sunday sessions. I think the fantastic thing about the kind of growing global, like world whiskey category is that we're seeing a traditional spirit made in much the same way as it's made in Scotland or in America or in Ireland, but each producing nation and each distiller within that puts their own slant on the product that is representative of the local market. Now, that could mean that it is made using ingredients that are local, be that the cereal or the wood, as is the case with Mackmyra, of course, the Swedish wood, or the peat, or it could be actually a little bit more kind of abstract than that. It could be that the flavor of the product somehow is representative of that place. So, and you tend to find that this sort of happens in whiskey, that the sort of flavors of, say, the cuisine of a nation sort of weaves its way, like not necessarily by design, into the flavor of the whiskey that's made there. We see it with Japanese whiskeys. You get these kind of like cherry blossom and umami flavors and kind of incense and things like that, because those are flavors that are nice and appreciated by Japanese people. So they're going to make a whiskey that tastes something like that. And I think we see it with Mackmyra as well, and with Swedish whiskey and with other whiskey from the Nordics as well. You sometimes find these kind of like, and actually this is a good segue into whiskey, because I think there's certain kind of piney notes to this whiskey. It reminds me slightly of juniper even. That's a flavor and aroma and ingredient that is common amongst Nordic cuisine. So I think it's one of the cool things about exploring wild whiskey is you get to see that sort of slight riff on a kind of something that you're familiar with, but it's just twisted ever so slightly, and it's super cool.
Yeah, it's like a little bit like gin, but whiskey is a little bit more subtle, because with gin you have all these things that you can take, like people talk about terroir, the things you have around you. And I think all the nations all around the world, I tried a lot of gin from all around the world, but everyone has a certain twist and a certain thing that you actually can get why it tastes like Swedish gin tastes like one thing, and gin from Scotland tastes like one thing. And it's the same with the whiskey, but I think it's more subtle, because you don't have to write it out that you have a juniper note or those kind of notes, because it's up for everyone else to try it. Yeah,
I mean, I think with gin, it can sometimes be quite a forced approach to getting that flavor in there for whatever it is you want. Let's say you're making a Mediterranean gin, and so you throw a load of like rosemary at it, or basil, or some other ingredient that you find in the Mediterranean that's common amongst that cuisine. And you go, oh yeah, wow, it tastes like basil and rosemary, or whatever it might be. Whereas with whiskey, there's not really the opportunity to do that, because the product still, in the case of a malt whiskey, is still going to be made from just barley and wood and water. You don't have the opportunity to throw some like pine needles in there, or some dill or whatever it might be, in order to kind of influence that flavor. That's done through the use of wood. It's done through the production process in the whiskey, and then it's done through blending by selecting the right barrels in order to achieve that flavor profile that you're after. And so for me, there's something a bit more discreet, a bit more subtle about that approach to engineering flavor in whiskey. You're to some extent still at the whims of the natural ingredients that you're using.
Yes, of course, because it's always like the water and like we talked about before, the wood and everything could be so close to where your distillery are or whatever. You're absolutely right. But now we moving forward. Great chat about that. We have the Brukswhisky, and Bruks is we talked a little bit before. It's like a mill city. In Sweden, we have a lot of bruksorter, and they're famous for doing like one thing. And it's different, but depending on where you are. In the north, different bruksorter had a lot more farming, or in the middle of Sweden you have much more industry, and in the southern parts we don't really know what they were doing. But yeah, so bruksorter is like a mill city. You're really good in one industry.
Yeah, we were talking about this before. We certainly have towns and cities like that in the UK, But there's, as far as I'm aware, not a kind of term to describe them. You know, industry town, I guess, would be the closest you could get, but it's not particularly catchy.
Yeah, no.
At least if there is a term, I don't know it.
No, because then like if it was the industry town, if the translation would be, this would be an industry whiskey, which sounds fucking awful.
It does, doesn't it? Industrial whiskey. That sounds
yeah, industrial. That term is really good. A totally new thing of making it. No, but this whiskey is more an homage to what Mackmyra, when they started doing whiskey. This is like an homage to that era, and also the era when we were in a small distillery, and which was in a small Brukswhisky. But now we're doing everything with the gravity distillation. But it's still kind of the same flavor that we did for the first Preludium. It's very light, I think. It's probably one of the lightest whiskeys we have, but also the most refreshing, if you know what I mean. You have those like green apple tones to this, and I think it's also...
Yeah, it's very green in general, I would say. There's certainly apple notes to it. But like I say, I pick up a little bit of pine, just that sort of fresh, fragrant, bracing green coolness to it, you know? And it's light. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Super appley, though.
Super appley. Very much pear. In Sweden, we have a ice cream called Piggelin. It's like Midori, but for kids. So it's like a Midori light, I think, but it's a classic ice cream. So we also write that on the bottle that it has Piggelin notes to it.
Ah, okay.
So if you read on the bottle, no one knows what Piggelin notes is.
Yeah,
but I thought it was pretty funny.
I don't know what anything that it says on the bottle is. So yeah.
Well, it's on English. You should know.
Oh no. My one's not in English.
Oh, you got the Swedish one.
Yeah.
I'll get the English one. Perfect.
You probably can't see that. It says Swedish. You've got the English and I've got the Swedish.
That's great. So you make the translation for me. No, but we also talked a little bit last week on how to work with whiskey cocktails, like we always do. But it's also like when we start doing the Sunday sessions, it's getting more that we talk about what kind of whiskey we're gonna use next week, but also what kind of style of drink we were talking about. So what are you up to this time?
Well, with a whiskey like this that is light, fragrant, fresh, my initial reaction would normally be to go towards the highball, because you know, you add carbonation to this and it just opens up the bouquet of it, makes it super accessible. You know, you could put a splash of apple juice and then top up with soda and you'd have a fantastic drink here, no question about it. But I wanted to try something different, and like I say, when I was tasting it, I picked up on this sort of greenness, fresh, light, and I thought, you know, maybe let's give it the martini treatment. Let's use it like a gin.
Cool.
So we end up with something somewhere between a martini, a Manhattan, a Martinez, which is sort of like the link between those two drinks. But you know, a drink where it's spirit mixed with vermouth, and then something to sweeten it, and perhaps some bitters. So that's what I'm doing. Super simple. So if you think about a classic Manhattan, Manhattan would consist of whiskey with either dry or sweet vermouth, most commonly sweet vermouth, and then a little bit of liqueur to sweeten it, perhaps, and bitters. And I'm more or less doing that with it. In Scotland, they'd call that a Rob Roy. We need to come up with a Swedish term for it at some point. Probably a Swedish folklore hero's name would be quite appropriate.
Any Viking god.
Yeah, so what I'm doing is I'm mixing it with dry vermouth, and then I'm going to put a little bit of elderflower cordial in there as well to play off that apple and pear, because apple and elderflower is super fantastic combination. Never failed. So you want to do a large measure of the Brukswhisky, so 45, 50 ml, something like that. Then I'm going to put 20 ml of dry vermouth. Now, you could do this with sweet vermouth, but those sort of darker, spicier notes are going to detract away from those kind of light apple, pear, pine aromas that you get from the whiskey. You're going to lose some of that. Yeah. Whereas dry vermouth, the sort of key characteristics of that are obviously white fruits and then herbal notes like thyme and rosemary and that kind of thing, which is good because they'll play nicely. They'll play nicely with the whiskey. And then it's just a tiny, tiny, tiny amount of elderflower. I mean, you're really looking at a bar spoon, just for a little bit of sweetness and a little bit of that floral quality as well. You could add bitters to it, but I'm not. I don't know why. I just don't feel like it. It doesn't feel quite appropriate. This is a delicate drink. I don't want it to be too bitter. And you know, if you think about a martini, most people don't add bitters to a martini. It's just vermouth and gin. Look at that stir.
Like elderflower cordial, can you buy it anywhere in UK?
Yeah, pretty much. It's available in most supermarkets. Yeah. Now, ideally, you'd stir that probably for at least a minute. Get it nice and cold. Plenty of dilution in there as well. You know, on paper, this looks like a really boozy drink, and it is fairly strong. But if you stir it long enough, you get it so cold and crisp, and you'll add a bit of dilution to it, that it's actually a surprisingly quaffable cocktail. I use quite small martini glasses, or coupe glasses in this case, mainly because you're not giving the drink too much time to warm up then. Ideally, this would come out of a freezer or a fridge, and then you pour it in there, and you'd probably finish the drink within the space of 5 or 10 minutes, and then make yourself another one. Maybe give yourself a 10-minute break, and then make another one.
But you don't need the break. That's what you're saying.
You don't have to have the break.
No,
it's not essential.
Good. No, it is. But isn't that a cool thing about dilution that you can make? We can talk about like a Manhattan or a martini. If you stir it for 10 seconds, it will be one cocktail that is pretty stiff, and you will talk about like the vermouth maybe disappear a little bit because the gin will overpower everything. But if you stir it for 15 seconds, you have a totally different drink. But then if you stir it for like 30 seconds to 1 minute, you get like the vermouth or anything coming forward, and then you get the gin or whatever. I think it's kind of the same thing with this, when you also have these sweet notes from the elderflower, that actually becomes the hero and the bridge between the other two flavors.
100%. I mean, you only need to look at like spirits, look at the strength that whiskeys are bottled at to see that every whiskey is different. Although there's common numbers like 40, 43, 46%, you know, this is 41.4. Why is it bottled at that strength? Well, that's because, you know, whoever blended it at Mackmyra decided that cut to that strength, the whiskey is at its best. But what it tells us is that it really makes a difference. You know, it's quite precise, 41.4. And we should really be looking at the cocktails we make with that same degree of scrutiny. We should be thinking about what strength the drinks can be served at and what temperature to best show off the flavors and the aromas of the cocktail. By the way, I've got a little bit of dill just in the top of there to garnish as well, instead of lemon or olive or whatever, just because it felt like a more Swedish thing to do.
It's very Swedish. We put dill on everything if we can.
Yeah. So just to run over the ingredients again, you got 50 mil. I mean, that's tasty. You got 50 mil of the Brukswhisky.
Yep.
20 or 25 mil. I go 20 mil probably of the dry vermouth, and 5 mil of the elderflower cordial. Stir it all down for a minute or two. Pour it out. A little bit of dill on top, or you could use lemon, whatever you like. And you've got yourself a really nice, you know, martini Rob Roy style cocktail there. You can't really go too far wrong with whiskey, vermouth, and then bitters or something to sweeten it slightly. It's a pretty winning formula. Yeah,
especially when you have these kind of styles of whiskey that doesn't become too smoky or whatever. You have this thing that they also almost goes to like the flavors of elderflower, apples, or whatever, those styles of flavor. But if it becomes too dark, and when I mean become too dark, you have those more maple notes and those kind of hardcore things. It's tend to be much more hard to balance.
Yeah, totally. If you had like a really smoky, like heavily sherried whiskey or something like that, it's a lot trickier to turn that into a Manhattan or Rob Roy style cocktail. Which is why, really, you know, these lighter whiskeys are the more versatile when it comes to mixing drinks, because you can highball them, because you can, you know, Manhattan them. You know, they're just super mixing liquids.
Yeah. Well, that was a great tip, and I think that for everyone too, to watch what Tristan did now, and also try a little bit experimenting at home on how to stir it and see actually the difference. Maybe do 3 exactly the same cocktails, but you mix them in a longer time or a smaller amount of time to see what happens when you actually dilute it hard.
Yeah.
I'm doing a little bit like you've been doing the last Sundays. I'm doing a highball today, which is fun for me because I'm a fan of highballs, but I don't do this as often. So we're obviously going to use the Brukswhisky, and the amount is around 40 ml ish. Then to make this a little bit more like when we talk about Bruksort in Sweden, we drink a lot of beer. And we've been doing that since the dawn of time, but also drinking a lot of mead. And mead is a really fun way of drinking, but it's also really easy to make at home. But it's still, because it's not even illegal anymore. I think it's never been, but it sounds better if it's been illegal for one time. So this is just a honey water with a little bit of bread syrup and rhubarb salt from an Icelandic producer, which is pretty common up here still, because you don't get as much Icelandic salt as you used to do. So it's a little bit of rhubarb salt. We just boil up, make a honey water, just like a 2- from a squeeze bottle. And then we have the most classic of all the soda waters in Sweden. It's Ramlösa, mostly famous for Sopranos, actually, because they stole a whole truck of Ramlösa soda water in like 97. So it became hugely popular amongst mobsters and all other cool kids during the 90s and in the beginning of 2000. So this is like, because the viscosity in the honey water is the same as the whiskey, so you don't even need to stir it. Just this is what you need to go out and have a great highball. But the bread syrup together with the honey makes it a little bit more bready notes. You can garnish with absolutely anything. Dill would be ideal, or something freshness, or like just pineapple or pine, whatever. Just a really easygoing highball.
How do you make the bread syrup?
So you can actually buy bread syrup here in Sweden. Right. Yeah, so just buy it at the store. It's just a brödsirap in Swedish. You make it when you do bread. And I know you're a big fan of bread, but this is like the most classic one that you have. It's so just I mix 50-50 of honey and bread syrup, and then just stir it up with warm water and some rhubarb salt.
And what do people normally use bread syrup for in Sweden?
Making sweet bread.
Oh, okay. So you add it to your bread dough, right? Got
yes.
You.
Yeah.
So when you do, it's not syrup made from bread. Then it's a syrup used to make bread.
Yeah, both.
Right. Okay. So it's made actually from like the sugars from wheat or whatever.
Exactly, and then you use it to enhance flavors or just sweeten a bread in a different way. So bakeries all over Sweden has been using it for ages, and it's like a most common thing. During the World War II, we had a lot of bread syrup because it was more like a little bit like how Nutella came by. You know what I mean? You had it as a substance, but then it would just stuck with it.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, but
do you have Brooks towns that just make bread syrup?
Probably yes. That would be great. When you go to Sweden next time, I just take you to the bread syrup villages and Mackmyra. That's it. Yeah.
The tour of all the bread syrup villages. Yeah.
We'll do it in 45 minutes, and then you can go back.
Great.
A really fun trip. Well, next time we probably will do something from the special series. I will send you a bottle. So it's more like a surprise for you. So you will have it on probably Thursday or Friday.
Cool.
So it will be a surprise for anyone that will be watching next Sunday. And the Sunday sessions, we will have more guests. I want it to be more like a talk show. I want to be the Swedish young version out of David Letterman, without the sexual assaults, obviously. But yeah, the kind of same style of guests. So we will see. It will be fun to see how many people that we can get along. But as long as you're with me, I'm fine, Tristan. And we're also doing Sunday sessions to give something back for the community. So when you click in on mackmyra.co.uk to our web shop, you can buy all our whiskies. But if you buy the Brukswhisky, you also get a discount this week, and that discount goes back to the bar, to BlackRock. So the discount code is obviously BlackRock, which is a good thing.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah,
that was the least we could do. So I'll see you next Sunday, Tristan, and take care of yourself.
Thanks a lot, Emil. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.